St. Lucia and Caribbean men, we need to advocate for policy change. We need to advocate for policy change because one of the things we have discovered is that in our labor laws in St. Lucia, it highlights very distinctly, and I respect that. It's good that the maternal the maternity benefits and protections, and we have no paternity benefits or protections in the labor laws. All right, it's only in the collective agreement, if I'm having that correct. So, as men, if we are going to do anything for the wave of masculine development, we have to put our awareness on policies. Let's look at policies that will create the environment for us to thrive as men, fathers, brothers, and sons. Hello, everyone. Just like to take a few moments to speak on, well, it's very exciting working on a long-term project. The first phase of this project was publishing this book, The Giant Magical Pants, which is about 3 years ago and purpose-driven, no, about 5 years ago, purpose-driven, 2019, both books. So we're moving to and launching our organization called Ideas for Boys and Men. It's been a year we launched that organization, and all of those aspects work together. So we're moving forward to phase 2. Phase 1 was publishing the books, phase and establishing the organization. And phase 2, we're moving into speaking on policy. We are organization to talk about men development, ideas for boys and men. And basically, we have noticed that experience has taught me that we speak a lot about fatherhood responsibility. When we launched our organization, we launched the name of our launch was Fathers Save Lives, and we really do believe that. And I've heard and I've seen and I've understood experientially, statistically, that fathers really need to take the responsibility, and we have had some very good critical comments to make about fathers not taking their responsibility. And I'm not going to argue with that. All I'm going to say in this presentation is the fact that we need to create the environment for fathers to be able to do the role or encourage them to participate in the role of fatherhood, because we do criticize and we have been looking down on the fact that men don't play that role properly. But I have an argument. I have a counter argument, not just to push back, but something to allow us to think about. So I think creating the environment, both criticizing and creating the environment is needed. And I feel the environment is not created properly for men to go ahead and take up that responsibility as they would want, and as is built in their biology to do so. And I will make my first point of the argument will be my experience as a father of 2 boys. When my wife was pregnant, I made it my duty deliberately, because I've heard the arguments for a very long time. I had my own personal experience, and I've heard all the arguments that men do not become fathers. They do not take up the role. The arguments have been there for a very long time. The harsh criticisms have been there for a very long time. So for my firstborn son, I went to every clinic from the day that I found out my wife was pregnant to the day that my firstborn son was brought into this world. I made to every clinic. I went to every doctor's visit. I had every experience with my wife. And from listening to the heartbeats, and I want to speak to the fathers if you are listening to the heartbeats, getting to know the gender, getting all of those things, they build something inside of you. And I went through the entire process. I did not miss one day for my firstborn son. And my secondborn, I missed at least 2 days. 2 clinical visits, and And it was devastating to me that I missed two clinical visits because I wanted to be there every single time. I wanted to change the narrative in some sense about fathers not being available in the life of their sons, and I wanted to do it from the inception. But my experience, I realized that hey, the structures, the environment was not catered for me to do what I was deep in my heart to do. It wasn't because one experience I had there, when I had my first son, um, I was working at one school. And when I had my second son, I was working at another school. And I realized that the structures, the environment, it was actually pushing me against wanting to be a son. What I'm saying, wanting to be a productive and engaging father. One experience that I had was when my wife was going through labor. She had a bit of complications, so I had to be at the hospital a couple of days before she gave birth. And I find I had to keep my eyes on the day that my son was born, so that I could start counting my 5 day paternity leave. And I'm saying that's strange that I'm only getting 5 day paternity leave because to me, in my understanding, in my knowledge, that a father in the life of a son or a child is very important. So I say 5 day paternity leave. And because my wife had a C-section, she stayed in the hospital for about way more than 5 days. So my whole 5 day paternity leave was spent at the hospital. And that was troubling to me. And that's actually in our policies. So we know there are a lot of male development things happening now. And if the male development things only stay in the meetings and the shows and the events, and we do not translate that into policy, we would have missed the mark. So I'm saying, in my experience, I'm saying that this is not normal. This is not normal because the same a man should be able to spend enough time to help his wife to bond with the child and to be able to develop that fatherhood instinct that we have. And I think that's one of the underdeveloped things that is going on. And I find that that's one of the policies that we need to really, well, I don't even think it's a policy, but that's one of the things that we need to advocate for in policy, that we increase the amount of time that we should increase the paternity leave. And in this video, we are going to talk a little on paternity leave. And what I want to tell you is the story of paternity leave. How did paternity leave come about? That's one of the policies we want to talk about. If we're talking about fatherhood, if we're interested in developing fathers so that fathers can translate into taking care of the children so that the children can be well mannered and we can reduce some of the social issues that we have, because I believe that fathers save lives, and all the research shows that a father that is involved in the life of a child or in a son, it helps in tremendous ways. It reduce prison, going to prison, it reduce drug addiction, it reduce crime and violence, it increase educational attainment. So if all the research shows that, we have all the data, all the research, we know those things. So why are we still engaging in the 5 to 7 day paternity leave policy? So the story of paternity leave shows that from the 19th century to the early 20th century, labor laws focus mainly on maternity leave because, and there was a reason for that, because the gender roles were very distinct: caregiver, provider. But in our modern society, those roles are not as distinct as it was before. And the mother was the primary caregiver, and the father was the primary breadwinner. From 1970 to 1919 introduced the new father movement, because 1970, 1960s, we saw the development or the push towards feminine empowerment, women working more, and all of that. So the culture shift, and we cannot take away from that. So the new father movement saw an idea. That's when the first emergence of paternity leave came about. And then from that time, from the inception, we had only 5 to 7 days, and up to today, we still have 5 to 7 days only in the Caribbean. But now states like Norway and Sweden and Iceland, They updated that policy via the father quota. They updated via a father quota policy in 1993 to 1995, where fathers get anywhere between 1 to 3 months. What did they understand? That's my question. What did Sweden and Iceland, what did they understand that allowed them to help them to update that policy while we still hold that policy right there in the Caribbean, 5 to 7 days? They understand two things very distinctly. I'm not going to take too much time. One, they understand and realize that the doctrine called the tender years doctrine, they got something wrong. There's a doctrine called the tender years doctrine. And that doctrine states the tender years doctrine, also referred to as the tender years presumption, was a legal principle that awarded custody to mothers based on the idea that mothers were natural caretakers with nurturing abilities and had more of biological connections to the children. The tender years doctrine first emerged in family law in 1881, stating that custody should be awarded to mothers following a divorce as they were the most capable and equipped parents to meet the needs of the children. Mothers were considered to provide the best and most adequate care for a young child's physical, emotional, and psychological needs. When all when all considerations are equal, children of younger or tender ages or older girls will be raised and receive the best care from the mothers. According to the tender years doctrine, this argument does not need support, as it is nature and motherhood is instinctive. It's a very good point at the end that motherhood is instinctive. So we're making the argument that motherhood is instinctive and fatherhood is not. And that's one of the things. We know something called maternal instinct, but I don't think a lot of us have understood that there is the equivalent. Obviously, we live in a dichotomous world. There's an equivalent called the paternal instinct. There is the paternal instinct, just like we understand a lot about what the mother nature go through, but we tend to miss some of the education on father order. So the paternal instinct is a real instinct, and they realize that they got that aspect wrong. So this doctrine appeared to keep up. Majority of policies had to keep up with the times that they were living in, because, like I said, the gender roles were very specific, and they had to create policies to keep up with the environment of the times. And because they realized that the times were changing and that no longer hold, they came up with what you call the best interest of the child standard, which, in my opinion, is not implemented in our legal system at the moment. I'm not sure. I don't have information on that. I would like to have a few consultations, if possible, if anybody is listening. I'm very interested in that aspect of law and development. And it was Richard Warshank and 110 of the world's leading parenting experts examined the data and realized that the tender years is so tender that infants and toddlers need both parents. So we're not saying that the tender year doctrine is only one parent is needed and the other parent can go out. Both the maternal instinct and the paternal instinct is really required. Another thing they got wrong was they realized that the development of the dad brain, and science and research shows that the father's brain is sensitive to childcare experience as well. And that's one of the things we are focusing on ideas for boys and men. The caregiving nature of the paternal instinct. Men have a caregiving nature, but men's caregiving nature, father's caregiving nature is not the same way that mother caregiving nature is. And that's where we have the distinction. A mother caregiving nature imposes on the father caregiving nature, but the father caregiving nature is a bit of encouragement, it's a bit of structure, it's a bit of growth, it's a bit of push. And the research explains that a man becomes a dad, he activates a nest of neurons that would otherwise be dormant if he did not if he does not care for somebody that's more important than him. That's what it means to care for a child. This develops his dad brain and triggers his paternal instincts, just as a mom has a maternal instinct. One we know very well, and the other we don't. So we know the maternal instinct, and we have loose track of the paternal instinct. We talk about a child having a lack of father, and that's one of the things we emphasize, the fact that the men don't stay in the home. the mothers they do not get support from the fathers. But do we even, again, I'm bringing something to your awareness, realize the pain that a father goes through when he does not have access to his child? We have not thought about that at all. Do have we thought about? We know children suffer when they do not have a father. We know the mothers suffer when the father is not in the home. But do we understand the pain that a father goes through when he doesn't have access to his child, doesn't have access to his son, doesn't have they did not develop the paternal instinct, did not develop the dad brain that. And I had an experience recently, and if the director of gender, we had an experience. I was talking to her at the she had an event, and we ended up talking to an officer, and he was actually explaining that in real time that he cannot understand why his demeanor and his ways towards his child, and that's not what he wants. And that's an interesting conversation. I would like to sit down and have a discourse with him as well. So that's something that we should take into consideration. So in conclusion, this is why St. Lucia and Caribbean men, we need to advocate for policy change. We need to advocate for policy change, because one of the things we have discovered is that in our labor laws in St. Lucia, it highlights very distinctly, and I respect that. It's good that the maternal the maternity benefits and protections, and we have no paternity benefits or protections in the labor laws. All right, it's only in the collective agreement, if I'm having that correct. So as men, if we are going to do anything for the wave of masculine development, we have to put our awareness on policies. Let's look at policies that will create the environment for us to thrive as men, fathers, brothers, and sons. Let's continue the journey from strength to strength.